Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, you have reached True Crime Tuesdays and I am your host this week. And my name's Holly, I'm your host every bloody week. So, today I'm on the sofa, I am comfy. If you hear any beating like this or like this, it's my dog. She sat next to me and she is currently upside down on her back wagging her tail. If you hear any huffs or puffs, it will also be my dog. If you hear any meows, it will be my cat being a sassy bitch like she always is. So today's story is HH Holmes and his murder castle. You want to hear more about it? Please join me and let's move in to HH Holmes' murder castle. Let's go! So this guy, this dude, you may have heard of him, you may not have heard of him. Pretty sure that if you are a true crime aficionado like me, then you will have heard of him. Oh, you will. And you may have heard of the conspiracies around him. However, let's get into the story, shall we? So HH Holmes was known as a different name in his early life. He was known as Herman Webster Mudgett, and he was born in a small town called Gilmanton in New Hampshire in the USA. You know, Mudgett, Herman. Pretty sure the only Herman that I've ever heard of is in the Munsters. Or the Addams Family? Was there a Herman in the Addams Family? He was born on May the 19th in 1861. So this story is very, very old. His dad was called Levi Horton, here's a who, Mudgett, and his mother was called Theodate Page Price. And he was the third born in that family. And because they didn't have TVs back then, I wouldn't imagine, they had nothing to occupy their times than making many, many children. And his parents were the descendants of the first English immigrants in that area, you know? So if you don't know much about England going over to the USA and making up stuff like houses and civilizations, then you can look at that. You can look it up, bro. Do your research.
You can look it up, bro. Do your research.
Holmes was his parents' third born child. He had an older brother called Arthur, an older sister called Ellen. He had a younger brother called Henry and a younger sister called Mary. So he was one of 5 children. His father came from a farming family who often did things like farming, obviously, trade work. He also painted houses as well. At the age of 16, Holmes graduated from school, from college, whatever. He went to the Phillips Exeter Academy and he graduated, and he went on to do teaching jobs in Gilmanton and later on in the next town along, Alton. And he met his wife there, Carla Lovering. They got married on July the 4th, 1878, not 1978, Jesus. And they had a son, Robert Lovering Mudgett. And Robert would become quite successful later in life. He would become a public accountant and later on become the city manager of Orlando, Florida. You okay, hon? She's going to be there a while, so I might as well continue. At the age of 18, Holmes enrolled at the University of Vermont. He wasn't there for long. He didn't like it there. So after 1 year, he left. And in 1882, he enrolled in the University of Michigan, and there he went to the Department of Medicine and Surgery. And he graduated in 1884. 4 after passing his exams. While enrolled, he basically worked with the anatomy lead. He basically worked in the anatomy lab under the then chief of anatomy, Professor William Herdman. And it is said that those sneaky two people, were the people who orchestrated, basically, the grave digging happenings for cadavers for the university to chop up and study anatomy. I need to tell you all of this stuff because it all does be relevant for the story. And I know I don't really like to get into much of the nitty-gritty, but his past life, his younger years, could be quite important to his later years in life and his murders. Just another thing to note, that he apprenticed under somebody called Nahum White. I think that's his name, that's how you pronounce it. He apprenticed under him, and he basically dissected bodies for a living. So, you know, also is relevant to the story. It's also relevant to a different story too. We'll get into that later. Later, when he was suspected of murder, Holmes would say basically that he did the grave robbing to defraud people, basically, you know, like life insurance companies and stuff, so that he could make a living. Shady. I think so. While he was in college or university doing all of this, there were rumours that he was extremely violent and abusive towards his wife Carla. And in 1884, she moved back to New Hampshire, and she didn't really hear much from him from then. And later, like not long after when he graduated, he actually moved on to somewhere called Moore's Fork, and that's in New York. So there was a rumour going around that somebody had seen him with this young boy while he was in Moore's Forks, and when he was questioned about it, he turned around and said, yeah, the boy went back to Massachusetts to its family, but the boy had disappeared retrospectively and nobody really actually knew what happened, but they took his word for it. So there was no real investigation into that boy's disappearance, and shortly after, almost immediately, Holmes upped and left town. Suspicious as it's just suspicious as hell, isn't he? And when he left, he travelled to Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and he got a job in Norristown State Hospital as a keeper. But lo and behold, he quit a few days after, probably because he didn't like it. He later took a position in a drugstore in Philadelphia, but when a young boy died from medication that was purchased at that drugstore, he was questioned about it, and he swore he had nothing to do with this because, you know, at this point, nobody had any reason to believe that he did, but he was questioned because he died because of some drugs that had been purchased in the drugstore that he was working at. Nothing came to fruition anyway. And basically, Mikey has mentioned me in a comment. Fabulous. Gynecologist who's on TikTok, my friends. So yeah, he basically again packed all his things, upped and left, and moved his ass to Chicago, where he changed his name to the famous name he is known as to this day, HH Holmes. And if you wonder what HH stands for in HH Holmes, it is Henry Howard Holmes. Henry Howard Holmes. And you know what? He changed his name because he didn't want to be detected after his previous victims of fraud, etc., etc. So, Mr. Holmes arrived in Chicago in 1886, and this would be when he would start to use his new name, you know, his new fancy bloody name. And he managed to get a job in another drugstore owned by Elizabeth S. Holton, And, you know, she would be like, he's a really good bloody worker, turns up on time, works really hard. And later on in his career there, he bought the bloody store. So there was rumours as well that, you know, in some of these books that people just go crazy about and people write without actually knowing true facts, not salty at all, that he actually killed her and her husband, but they actually did live into the 20th century, quite far in, and they were fine, you know. So there's no meat to that story. It is not true that he killed those two people. Later on, he purchased a lot across the road from the drugstore and started construction on that in 1887 for a 2-story building, multi-use building. And on the second floor, it would have apartments. And on the first floor that you saw at the storefront, it would have like shops, including another drugstore. And one of the creditors of Holmes, that's somebody who lends him money so that he can go ahead with building this amazing building that would bring jobs into the city. He died in 1891 in the drugstore of apoplexy. And anyway, so the creditor had died, so no more money was coming in to be lent to Holmes. So he then refused to pay the architects for the steel company that was doing all the work, and they sued him basically in 1888. He got sued, and in 1892 he would start construction again, telling investors and other people that would go there that the third floor that is going to be constructed would be a hotel for the upcoming World's Columbian Exposition. And you know, they took it, and it was never really completed, but it was somewhat completed enough to house people anyway. So yeah, so on the third floor was the somewhat completed hotel that wasn't really actually completed or anything. On the second floor was the apartments. On the first floor was the storefront, basically, where all the shops were, and there was a basement as well. Oh my god. So let's get into the victims and what happened to them. So this was the birth of the murder castle, as it is now known. So as I've said before, on the first floor, the building had like loads of shops and stuff, including a new pharmacy. On the second and third floor, it was basically Holmes's office and living quarters. I believe he lived there. It doesn't really say whether he actually lived there or not. And over 100 other rooms for people to live in, you know, like little occupado rooms were. And the basement, my friends, the basement is a bit shady. So some of these rooms were soundproof, and some of them also had gas lines to them, so that Holmes could asphyxiate its occupants whenever he pleased. And it's also said that in this hotel, castle, whatever, it's a massive hotel with bits in it. It's not really a castle. There were trapdoors, peepholes and stairways that led to absolutely nowhere. And, you know, it's just a little bit creepy, so he could trap people. So if he was chasing them to kill them, and he knew exactly that they wouldn't be able to get anywhere. There were also like chutes. If you don't know what a chute is, I think in America they call it the trash chute. So if you live in an apartment building, there's a little door that you pull out and put your rubbish in, and it goes down to the bin area or the basement, and his chutes went down to the basement. Let me tell you about the basement, folks, because it's a little bit questionable. So in the basement, it was designed by Holmes as a place where he could dissect bodies and stretch their skin out and cremate them. So there was a dissection table, there was a stretching rack for the skin, and other things, and there was a crematory. So when he'd killed somebody or he'd asphyxiated them through the gas lines in the rooms, he would shove the bodies down the chute that would send them to the basement. He would then chop them up and he would then skin them. Trigger warning. I should have put a trigger warning. Mikey, put a trigger warning in at the start. Put your face on it if you must.
Holly, you wanted a trigger warning with my face on. Guys, this is a trigger warning and this is my face. There you go, Holly.
Yeah, he would take all the skin off, strip the bones of the skin, and sometimes he would sell these skeletons, like pieces of skeletons back together, and sell them to schools and universities for medical purposes and anatomy classes. Why not? Maybe he was the one who invented that. I don't know if it was there before. And not only was he orchestrating all these murders, managing the shops and stuff and controlling everybody's monies, he was also running around the US committing insurance scams. And he actually got caught for this and got put in prison. And while he was in prison, he met a guy called Marion Hedgepeth. And together, because they were cellmates, they were like best-selling mates, you know, they came up with this plan that Holmes was going to fake his own death and collect the insurance money for it, which would be $10,000. And Hedgepeth would get $500 of this, which back in those days, $500 is a lot of money. So yeah, so they made this plan, and Holmes tried to do this plan. It didn't work. The insurance companies were, in fact, very suspicious of the guy, and I was like, no, mate, you're still alive. So because of this, Hedgepeth never heard anything, never got any money, and he was angry about this. Eventually, he told the police of this plan. In between this time, Holmes had gone to his right-hand man, I think his name was something Peitzel, and they came up with a plan that Peitzel was going to do this insurance scam, fake his death, which he did. Holmes then went on to kill his children, which were found later in the basement of their home. So yeah, so Hedgepeth went to the police and said, look, this dude, he's been committing insurance scams. Because, you know, there's nothing worse than a petty criminal that is like, I didn't get my money, so you're going down again, bro. So the police investigate this, and in their investigation, they searched the murder castle. And they found things that would suggest that Mr. HH Holmes had actually been torturing and murdering people. So he was arrested. He was charged for murder. He actually admitted to murdering 27 people. Yeah. But it is actually believed that he, Mr. H.H. Holmes, committed over 200 murders. That's a lot of people. There's a bit more to this story as well to do with his wives and stuff. Obviously, he was married to Carla Lovering. He did have 2 or 3 other wives, and everybody who worked for him had to take out life insurance policies and make him the beneficiary if they did pass away. One of his wives he killed, but he told everybody that that she died of abortion complications, which he was thought to be not that experienced in it, so it wouldn't have gone that well. But the high death rate back then of abortions was not as small as it is now. So pretty much quite a few people died if they had an abortion because of infections and stuff. I believe that he also was married to a woman whose husband used to work for him, and they were having an affair, and the husband left because they were having an affair. Yeah, and he moved them out to a different house basically. But it's like a rabbit hole. Not only those stories, it is also believed, And this comes from the great-great-grandson of HH Holmes, who I believe is still alive. He believes that HH Holmes was in fact Jack the Ripper, because in HH Holmes's diaries there is mention that he went with his assistant, his partner in crime, over to London at the time of the Whitechapel murders that were happening, and he was in London at that time, and with his medical experience and surgical experience and an anatomical experience, it could be true. So what do you guys think? Like, do you think he could be Jack the Ripper? Because as soon as, like, the murders in the US went a bit quiet, or the disappearings went a bit quiet, and he went on holiday over to London, and the murders started in London, and then when he went from London, because Jack the Ripper disappeared, didn't he? He disappeared off the face of the planet. And as soon as those murders finished, the murders or disappearances in the US started up again. So let me know what you think, guys, in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a big like, a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Go and watch the other ones in the playlist. If you like gaming and stuff, go and watch the gaming videos that are also on here. If you like TikTok, go and watch the TikTok videos over here. You know, go check out the whole of the channel. Next week we have a doozy for you. It's probably a well-known story. It's going to be the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. We have some interesting stories coming up as well. True crime cases. One's Jeffrey Dahmer, which will be next week. One is a toy box killer, which will be the week after. I'm going. Bye.